I never thought the day would come when my own son would look me in the eye and ask me to leave my own home. I had done everything I could to give him a good life. After his mother passed away, it was just the two of us. I worked tirelessly, sacrificed vacations, hobbies, and even my health to ensure he had everything: good clothes, education, a warm bed, and a future. I was proud of the man he was becoming. But I guess pride is a dangerous thing. 3 months ago, I lost my job. It wasn't because I messed up. The company was downsizing, and after 23 years, I was one of the many let go. At first, I didn't tell my son. I thought I'd bounce back quickly, find another job before the bills caught up with me. But weeks passed. Savings dried up faster than I expected. I was behind on bills. I started selling small things from around the house: old watches, some furniture, even my suits. My son noticed, of course, but I brushed it off. He found out the truth from a friend of mine he ran into at a cafe. When he came home that night, I could see the coldness in his eyes before he even said a word. He didn't ask me how I was doing, didn't ask how I felt or if I needed anything. Instead, he stood in the living room, arms crossed, and told me I should have come clean. He said he couldn't carry the burden of a grown man who couldn't take care of himself. Those words hit harder than I thought possible. I tried to explain, tell him I was doing everything I could, but he'd already made up his mind. "I need space," he said flatly. "This is my house now too, and I can't live with someone who's just giving up." He handed me a duffel bag and walked out of the room. I stood there, stunned, holding a piece of my life packed into a cheap bag. That night, I slept in the park across from our neighborhood. The same park I took him to when he was 5 and wanted to feed the ducks. That memory kept replaying in my head as I lay on a bench, shivering under my jacket, wondering where I went wrong. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just broken. Lost. I didn't know if I could forgive him or myself. How does a father, after everything, become disposable in his child's eyes? The answer never came, not that night, nor the next. Just silence, hunger, and the ache of betrayal sitting heavy in my chest like a stone I couldn't dislodge. But I kept walking, not because I had a plan, just because stopping didn't feel like an option. I spent the next few weeks drifting from one place to another, trying to find stability in a world that had turned its back on me. Shelters were overcrowded, and most nights, I found myself sharing spaces with strangers who, like me, had stories no one cared to hear. I took odd jobs: washing dishes, cleaning sidewalks, unloading delivery trucks, whatever kept me moving and fed. Pride had long left me. All I wanted was to feel human again. One morning, after a sleepless night in a noisy downtown shelter, I saw a flyer for part-time help at a local bookstore that needed repairs. It wasn't much, but it was something. When I walked in, I met her. She had a soft voice and eyes that didn't flinch when they met mine. She didn't ask about my past or why I looked the way I did. Instead, she handed me a list of tasks and said, "Let's see what you can do." Her name was Maya. She ran the place alone after inheriting it from her grandmother. The bookstore was old, dusty, and quiet, almost forgotten. But there was something about the space that felt peaceful, like it had been waiting for someone to bring it back to life. I started fixing shelves, cleaning corners, repainting walls. She worked beside me, sorting through books, organizing sections. We didn't talk much at first. But slowly, she started asking questions: where I was from, what I used to do, what I liked to read. It had been a long time since someone asked about me, without judgment. I told her bits and pieces, not everything, just enough. She didn't flinch when I mentioned losing my job. She nodded when I spoke about my son. No pity in her eyes, only quiet understanding. She told me about her own struggles, how she gave up a high-paying job to take care of the bookstore after her grandmother fell ill. She said people thought she was crazy for walking away from her career, but peace was more important to her than success. The more we talked, the more I felt something I hadn't in a long time seen. Not as a failure, not as someone to be pitied, but simply as a man who had been through things. Maya didn't try to fix me. She just made room for me to breathe. She brought me tea, without asking. She laughed at my dry humor. And one rainy afternoon, When I confessed how helpless I felt when my own son turned me away, she didn't respond with advice. She simply placed her hand on mine, steady and warm, and said, "Sometimes people break when they're too scared to bend. But that doesn't mean you're broken." I didn't know what to say, but in that moment, I realized I didn't have to say anything. Her presence was enough. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or something close to it. The days working at the bookstore turned into weeks, and slowly, my life began to shift. The shop that once felt like a quiet hiding place started to feel like a new beginning. I found purpose in the little things: organizing the front window, fixing a squeaky door, setting up a reading corner. Maya encouraged every idea I had, no matter how small. Her belief in me was silent but unwavering, and it gave me the strength to keep showing up. We fell into an unspoken rhythm. She brewed tea in the mornings, I swept the front steps. She stacked new arrivals, I fixed a broken shelf. What began as convenience became comfort. Conversations grew deeper. We talked about dreams we'd buried and chances we never took. I told her how I once dreamed of opening my own consultancy firm, how I gave it all up to raise my son. She listened like it mattered. One afternoon, she brought me a laptop, older but functional. "In case you want to write that business plan," she said casually. I hadn't touched a keyboard in months. I sat there, staring at the blinking cursor, feeling something in me come alive again. I started building a portfolio from scratch, offering freelance consulting to small local businesses. It didn't pay much, but it was mine. Every reply to an email, every invoice sent, felt like a quiet win. Meanwhile, the bookstore began to change. Customers trickled in more often, drawn by a new warmth that wasn't just the decor. Maya and I had created something real, welcoming and honest. People stayed longer, chatted more, even brought friends. One elderly couple came every weekend just to talk. They said the store had a soul again. Maya and I grew closer, not out of loneliness, but because we saw each other clearly. She never pushed, never expected anything from me. And maybe that's why it happened so naturally. A glance held longer than usual. A shared joke. Then one evening, without a word, we just leaned into each other. No big declarations, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was real, easy, gentle. She made me laugh again, deeply. And when I looked at her, I didn't see someone saving me. I saw someone walking beside me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. One night, as we locked up, she looked at me and said, "You know, sometimes the life we're supposed to live doesn't look like the one we planned. But that doesn't make it any less beautiful." I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to, because she was right. I hadn't planned any of this. But somehow here I was, standing, working, healing, and maybe even loving again. And in that silence, I realized I was finally building a life that belonged to me. Not one centered on being someone's father, employee, or provider. Just a man reclaiming himself, piece by piece. I never thought I'd hear from my son again. Months had passed since the day he shut the door behind me, and I had stopped hoping. But one morning, while checking emails on the old laptop Maya gave me, I saw his name. A short message, barely a few lines, asking if we could talk. I stared at the screen, unsure what I felt. Anger? Sadness? Maybe both. But curiosity won. We met at a small cafe. He looked thinner, tired. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice cracked. He said he'd been wrong, that he didn't understand how much I'd carried all those years, that his pride and fear got the best of him. He told me he thought pushing me away would motivate me, force me to bounce back. Instead, it left him feeling empty. I listened quietly. He apologized again, this time slower, with his eyes on mine. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He just asked for a chance to know me again. I didn't answer right away. I needed time, not to hold a grudge, but to be honest with myself. I wasn't the same man he turned away. And I didn't want to go back to that life just to make him comfortable. Later that evening, I told Maya everything. She didn't offer advice or judgment, just sat there and let me unpack the weight of it all. She reminded me gently that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it just means letting go of the pain we no longer want to carry. The next week, my son came by the bookstore. It was awkward at first, but Maya made it easier. He saw the life I'd built, the respect I'd earned, the happiness I never thought I'd find again. We sat in the back of the shop and talked for hours. Not about the past, but about now. He admitted how lost he'd been without his mother and how he unfairly expected me to never break. I told him I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of trying to be someone I wasn't allowed to be. We didn't fix everything that day, but we began again. Not as father and son trying to return to what was, but as two people learning to understand each other, without expectations. He started visiting more often, helped with the shop sometimes, asked about my clients. Slowly, we were building something fragile but honest. And as spring settled in, the bookstore bloomed in its own way. We hosted small readings, invited locals to share their stories, and watched as people found comfort in the space we'd shaped. I looked around one day and realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, really living. Maya stood beside me, hand in mine, no words needed. My son laughed with a customer by the window. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a man who had lost everything. I felt like a man who had found exactly what he needed: peace, love, and a second chance on his own terms.